Bonjour French 101 students, bienvenue au vidéo 9 du chapitre 1, le vidéo final du chapitre 1. So we're at the final video of chapter 1, and in this video we'll be talking about language and vocabulary you would be using to talk about your college experience, your university experience, and we'll also finish it up by talking about the definite article, which is just 3 little words you use before nouns. Okay, so we'll get started with this first slide we see here, l'université et les cours. So 2 cognates there that are definitely recognizable words from French. So we're talking about university or college and the classes we take there. And you remember in other videos from this chapter that this expression, est-ce que, is the one that automatically signals to you that this is a question. Of course, there's a question mark at the end, but when you see est-ce que, you know that you're going to have a question. You could delete that, and you could simply ask, vous aimez l'université? That would still be a question. It's possible to do that. You could also do this, which you will learn a little more about later on. You could invert these words, and that will also automatically signal that this is a question. Aimez-vous l'université? Okay, but I can go ahead and undo those changes, and we'll go back to our original one, est-ce que. Est-ce que vous aimez l'université? And you can say what you like and what you prefer, and we can see that with all of these categories here. So let's go ahead and put these in bold so they're easy to notice, they stand out to us. Okay, so we can start up in the top left corner with j'aime beaucoup. J'aime comes from the verb aimer, which means to like. Okay, so j'aime beaucoup, I like a lot, or I really like. And what are some things that I might like at college or at university? Les profs, notice that this part, esseur, is in parentheses, and that means in kind of everyday speech, common language, people might often drop that part of the word, just like we would say dorm instead of dormitory. Even sometimes we do that here in the US. We say prof instead of professor. So you could say les profs, or if you want to say the whole word, it can be les professeurs. Okay, of course we have les étudiants, and notice that the S in les is pronounced when it's joined onto this word that begins with a vowel, étudiant. Le campus, and finally, le livre de français. So we have the professors, the students, the campus, and the French book. So notice all these words, and I'm going to highlight them here because we're going to come back to this at the end of our video. These are all definite articles, and it's the same thing as the in English, basically. We have one form for this, where French has 3. And we will see that these are le, la, and les. We happen to have just le and les in this category. But in French, there are 3 forms of that article, the. We just have one, so keep that in mind. These have les in front because they are plural. It's more than one professor, more than one student, one campus, one French book. Okay, I can move on to the next category and say j'aime assez. Assez means pretty or rather, so I rather like, or I pretty much like, la bibliothèque. I can also call it la bibli if I want to make it shorter, just like les profs instead of professeur. I can say le laboratoire de biologie. So remember bibliothèque, I'll jump back to that, is library. Le laboratoire de biologie would be the biology lab, and notice you can cut off laboratoire and just call it le labo. And finally, les cours en ligne. We are all used to that these days, right? So online courses. En ligne is online. Okay, you can also say what you don't like. Let me backtrack here really quick. I meant to highlight all those articles, the definite articles that all mean the. And notice that now we have la in there. So keep in mind that le is for masculine nouns, la is for feminine nouns, and les is for plural nouns. Okay, now on to talking what we don't like. Je n'aime pas du tout. So I can start with je n'aime pas. Remember that when we make a verb negative, you're going to put ne before it and pas after it. We drop the e of ne because aime starts with a vowel. So je n'aime pas, I don't like. Okay, I could say je n'aime pas les devoirs, homework. Les devoirs literally means like the tasks or the obligations. In French, it's a plural form. In English, we have just one word, one singular word for that, homework. Okay, je n'aime pas les examens. So notice the liaison here between les and examen, les examens. Okay, so I don't like exams. Je n'aime pas la salle d'informatique. That would be basically the computer lab. It's like the information technology room, so the computer lab. And again, we'll highlight all of our definite articles here, so we're kind of getting used to seeing those. So every time you learn a noun, you're going to learn its gender along with it, and that makes it easier later when you need to use that noun again. This little phrase, du tout, means at all in the negative sense. So I do not like at all homework, exams, or the computer lab. And finally, je préfère les fêtes, le sport, les matchs de basket. Okay, so I prefer these things. I prefer parties, I prefer sports. Notice in English, sports is a plural noun. We add an S to the end. In French, it's not. Le sport. Hey, les matchs de basket, basketball games. I'm sure lots of Landers students like to go and watch those. Okay, so these are all the different kind of places we might see around the university and different ways of talking about those things. So for you to practice this, I would like you to choose one of these categories. You could say what you like, you could say what you pretty much like, you can say what you don't like or don't like at all, or what you prefer, and just choose one thing from one of those categories. So if I were going to answer, est-ce que vous aimez l'université? I could say, j'aime beaucoup le campus, and that might be my answer. So I'll go ahead and let you choose one of these. Okay, so now we'll move on to looking at some vocabulary for subjects. So there's lots of different subjects and classes and majors that you can study when you're in college. And the question we would ask for that is, qu'est-ce que vous étudiez? So qu'est-ce que would be what. Remember, est-ce que just shows you that you have a question. Que means what. So it's like, what do you study, or what are you studying? It could be either one. Okay, so to answer that, I'm going to use the verb étudier, and I'll put the infinitive form of that verb right here. Okay, so étudier means to study, but when I conjugate it, I'm going to have it in different forms, right? J'étudie, tu étudies, elle étudie, nous étudions, vous étudiez, ils étudient. And so in this statement, I'm saying j'étudie la philosophie. Notice that this has part of the word in parentheses too, so the short form is philo. J'étudie la philo. Et je n'étudie pas la littérature. Okay, so for this one, I'm adding ne and pas before and after this verb to say what I do not study. Okay, so we have different categories, different subject areas. So we have les langues, like l'anglais, l'espagnol, le français. We have les sciences humaines. Okay, so that would be like human sciences, kind of like social sciences. L'histoire, la psychologie. This one is kind of a funny word because you do pronounce the P when you say psychology in French. In English, it's silent. But for this one, make sure you pronounce the S. La psychologie. Or you can abbreviate this too. You can say la psycho. Okay, this is also the subject area, les sciences politiques, political science. This one is often abbreviated too to les sciences po. Okay, and then we have les arts. Okay, this one has the liaison, les arts, le théâtre, la musique, et la peinture. So theater, music, and painting. Okay, so I can ask you this question and choose any one of these subject areas. Even if it's not your major, you can just choose one subject area that you study. Okay, so qu'est-ce que vous étudiez? Hey, and we have more subject areas. So we have le commerce, which would be like business, le commerce international, international business. We have les technologies, like l'informatique, les mathématiques, or you can shorten it to les maths. We have les sciences, comme la biologie, which can also be la bio, and la chimie, which is chemistry. One thing I would say to really pay attention to with all of these subject names is the spelling. I think because a lot of them look so similar to English words, and they're definitely pretty much all cognates, when you're writing them down on an exam or something, just make sure you've got that spelling really well committed to memory, because I think sometimes it's easy to misspell them to look more like the English word than to look like a French word. So something to watch out for. Okay, so I can finish this up by saying j'aime beaucoup le cours de, il est facile, difficile, intéressant. So I could say j'aime beaucoup le cours de la biologie, il est très facile, or il est facile, il est intéressant. Okay, so out of the courses that you see here, I'd like you to say the same thing. J'aime beaucoup le cours de, you can choose your subject area, and then say whether it's easy, difficult, or interesting. So, j'aime beaucoup le cours de la biologie, il est facile. That's my example. Now you try. Okay, and now we come back to all those definite articles that I was telling you about. So we have le, which is the masculine form of the, la, which is the feminine form of the, L apostrophe or L apostrophe, which is the form that you would use before any word that starts with a vowel. It can be masculine or feminine. And we have les, which goes before all plural nouns, whether they are masculine or feminine. Okay, so it really just depends on what comes after. Oops, went too quickly there. Okay, so if we have a word like livre, which is a masculine noun, it's going to have the article le in front of it. If we have a feminine noun like librairie, which is bookstore, it will have a feminine noun, feminine article la in front of it. Okay, if you have a word that begins with a vowel sound like for man, that H is silent, so the sound that comes after it is a vowel sound. So we're going to use the L apostrophe before that. It's a masculine noun. You don't necessarily know that from the article that comes in front of it, but you still need to know it's a masculine noun if you're going to use an adjective after it that might need to agree with that noun. So I could say something like l'homme content, like content means happy or glad. I could say la femme contente. So it depends on whether it's a masculine or a feminine noun. So I need to know that to know which form of the adjective to use. Okay, l'étudiante is the same way. This is the feminine form, but we don't necessarily know that from the article that comes before it. All of the plural forms are preceded by les. So les livres, les hommes, if the word begins with a vowel sound, you're going to use the liaison. Les librairies, and finally les étudiantes starts with a vowel sound. Okay. And we have just one more here to look at. And it looks like, yeah, it got switched around. That's fine. Okay, so when do we use this definite article? Like I was explaining before, the definite article is just the equivalent of the in English. If you compare a and an in English, the indefinite article, to the definite article the, one is more specific than the other. The is the more specific option, and that's why we call it the definite article, because it's pointing out something definite and concrete. A and an are the indefinite articles because they point out something more general. So in this example sentence, it's saying étudier le vocabulaire à la page 23. Study the vocabulary on page 23. We're pointing out the vocabulary that is specifically on page 23, not just any vocabulary. It's a very specific set. Okay, I can say what I like, dislike, or prefer. Je n'aime pas les devoirs. I don't like homework. In this case, we wouldn't use any article at all in English. In English, often when we have really general kind of abstract nouns, we leave them out. In this case, French would use the article. Okay, or to talk about something as a general category or an abstract noun. So if I were to say, les langues sont faciles pour moi, I'm saying all languages in general are easy for me. And in English, we wouldn't even use an article in that case. We tend not to use them for general categories. Hey, les fêtes sont plus amusantes que les devoirs. Well, the parties are more fun than homework. Okay, so here, like in English, I wouldn't use articles for parties or for homework. I'm talking about them as general categories, so I'd leave them off. In French, you do have to use them. Okay, so that basically is just a crash course on the definite article. Just be aware that they point out specific things. And the other thing is that they tend to be used in more places than we would use them in English. So if we have a general category word, like in the sentences we see right there, you would not use them in English, but you probably would use them in French. So anytime you have an abstract or general word, and a good example would be society is complex. Okay, I don't use any article before society, but in French I would. La société est très complexe. So just something to be aware of, that French uses articles a lot more than we do in English. Okay, so we'll wrap it up there for chapitre 1. C'est la fin. It's the end. Okay, so you have all the material that you need from all the videos to carry you through to Examen 2, the second exam. And just let me know if you have questions about any aspect of vocabulary or grammar for that exam. Okay, and we'll see each other in chapitre 2.